In this section, we'll ask, can AI be fair? Can it exhibit human-like morality? Let's talk about one more ethical concern, AI fairness, or the lack thereof. Can AI be fair? You've probably heard that AI is frequently unfair to disadvantaged groups, including at different times, persons of color, women, the poor, the disabled, the neurodiverse, and more. AI systems for hiring, firing, and promotions, for deciding who gets home loans and business loans, for determining who will be granted medical care, or for making specific medical diagnoses, have all been shown to be unexpectedly biased against certain groups. Shouldn't AI know better? After all, it's supposed to be intelligent. Well, as we know, since AI is often limited by the training data we give it, and because we as individuals and as a society have biases when we create and collect data or make decisions, even if we do all of that unintentionally, AI inherits those biases. Garbage in, garbage out, as some like to say provocatively. But the problem can actually be more pernicious than that, because AI doesn't just reflect our biases, it frequently amplifies them. Further, our decisions about how to use AI can be biased too. Like, for example, when we are more likely to accept medical AI's false negative diagnoses towards one racial group than towards another, leading to less people in that group getting the treatment they need. So our own decisions about how to interact with AI can amplify bias too. Okay, but shouldn't we be able to teach AI how to be fair? Maybe. But first we need to define fairness. Here's one possible definition. We can say that AI predictions are fair when they're equally accurate for all groups. Consider an AI that is supposed to predict whether a criminal defendant is going to commit a crime if they're granted the opportunity for bail while they await trial. The decisions this AI makes are a pretty big deal, because defendants who the algorithm says are most at risk for committing a crime will not be granted bail and will instead have to wait in prison without the ability to work or take care of their family until their trial is finished, even if they're eventually found not guilty. By our first definition, this AI would be fair to different racial groups if it was equally accurate overall for those racial groups across all these possible prediction outcomes. But now here's an alternative definition. AI predictions are fair when they impose incorrect bad outcomes equally for different groups. By this definition, AI predictions are fair to different racial groups when they make false positives equally across those racial groups, meaning they're equally likely to deny bail from people who aren't at high risk across those racial groups. These are just two possible definitions of what it is to be fair, but there are actually over 20 different mathematical definitions of fairness, and more being made all the time. And here's the rub. It turns out that many of these definitions of fairness are mathematically incompatible. In other words, they can't be true at the same time when certain differences in the group truly exist in the data. So which definition of fairness is the right one to guide AI development? And who should get to decide? Here's yet another notion of fairness to consider: fair access. If neuro-AI or AI-driven neurotechnologies are used to create useful tools or even cognitive enhancements, it's unlikely that all groups in society will have equal access to them. Further, if those technologies are used to do things like surveil you on the job or screen you before you even start a job, it seems likely that neurodivergent people, as well as other groups who might be underrepresented in the training data, could be disproportionately impacted. So this is another type of fairness we need to think about. This brings us to some provocative questions. What if we could teach AI to do better? Could we build morality into AI, perhaps in ways that are similar to how humans learn moral behavior? How would we go about doing that? One approach would be to build in morality from the top down by using some kind of moral principles or theory. One reason we might want to do this is that then we should be able to easily analyze and explain an AI's moral behavior. The problem, of course, is that people, including people who study ethics for a living, disagree about which moral principles or theory are best, so it's not clear which ones to choose. Further, each moral theory has advantages and disadvantages. For example, one moral theory that many people find appealing is called consequentialism. It proposes that we should do whatever maximizes good consequences and minimizes bad consequences in the long run. This sounds reasonable and maybe even intuitive, but the devil is in the details. To apply consequentialism to a specific decision, the decision maker has to have information about how all their possible actions could affect all possible beings forever, both in the short and long term. Nobody knows how to obtain such an immense amount of information with enough certainty, especially in a computationally tractable way. And consequentialism, applied in the wrong way, could also lead to some pretty scary outcomes. For example, a consequentialist AI that was programmed to minimize the total amount of suffering and death in the long run could end up determining that it should just kill all humans now, since that would prevent all human suffering in the future, since there wouldn't be any humans left in the future to suffer. Okay, so what if instead of trying to draw on moral theory, we try to come up with some good moral rules? That sounds more practically and computationally feasible, since doing so does not require processing information about all the possible consequences of each act in every situation, and it also just seems reasonable. But the approach quickly runs into problems because nobody has been able to come up with a set of rules that address all moral situations adequately. For example, imagine we started with the rule of an AI may not injure a human being or, through inaction, allow a human being to come to harm. Is it really true that we want AIs to prevent any harm to any human? Do emotional harms count? What if we want an AI to remove offensive social media posts, but doing so would make the authors of the post emotionally distraught? By our rule, wouldn't that mean the AI couldn't take the post down? What should an AI-driven robot do when a human attacks another human, and the robot cannot prevent harm to the victim without injuring the aggressor? Our rule clearly isn't adequate to handle these kinds of situations. So maybe that means moral rules are meant to be broken sometimes. A famous illustration of this focuses on the moral rule that you shouldn't lie. Most people agree that's an important and valid moral rule. But even so, if an assassin who wants to kill your friend breaks into your house and demands that you tell them where your friend is hiding, most people think you are justified in lying by telling the assassin you don't know, even if you do know where your friend is hiding because you're helping them hide in your house. So what should we tell an AI about when a rule like don't harm a human being or don't lie can be overridden? We could try to write out a list of exceptions to give the AI, but the number of exceptions we would need just seems endless. Further, what should we tell the AI about how to prioritize duties and rules when they come in conflict with each other, like when not harming a human is in conflict with the rule not to lie? Without some scalable way of resolving such conflicts, AIs are not going to be able to figure out what to do in novel situations in a way that is reliably acceptable to us. Okay, so let's ditch the top-down approach for a moment and consider what it might look like to use a bottom-up approach for building morality into an AI, where AI learns the right thing to do from many examples of our own behavior or moral judgments. If we follow this approach, in some ways things get easier for us. In particular, human AI creators wouldn't have to make any explicit decisions about what moral theories or rules to follow, and even what is or is not moral, because the AI would figure out on its own from our own examples. But of course, other things would get harder, like where would we get the data to train such an AI? And what should that data even look like? What should the AI learn when people's judgments and the training data oppose each other because people violently disagree about what the morally right thing to do is in a situation? And what if people change their minds and their decisions over time, and the training data has our judgments from both before and after we changed our minds? What if our moral judgments are plagued by implicit bias that we're unaware of, and that bias gets amplified by the AI? And if an AI uses black box algorithms, as many bottom-up approaches do, how will we be able to know if the AI is managing these issues in ways we find morally acceptable? All of these things can make the bottom-up approach go awry, and maybe even horribly awry. Well, there's yet one more approach we could try. We could try to make a hybrid, top-down and bottom-up approach. Perhaps we could crowdsource opinions from a large, highly diverse set of people about what kind of features should matter in specific types of moral scenarios, actively collect data from people about what they think is right or wrong in many scenarios that vary values in those features, and then use interpretable and explainable AI to determine how much weight people give to each feature and what they think should be done when features conflict with each other in different ways. Then we can aggregate those models we learned of people's moral judgments in a systematic and principled way and build them into other AI systems. This approach has many advantages, including the fact that, like many top-down approaches, it is very explainable and makes it clear what features the AI uses to make decisions and in what ways, while, like some bottom-up approaches, allows AI creators to avoid being the ones who determine what features or rules will be applied. Its primary disadvantage is that it's not clear how the approach could help AIs in brand new moral situations not in their training data set that require new moral features to navigate. In other words, it may help us make good progress towards a narrow moral AI, but it's less clear how to adapt it to help us make a general moral AI. With that, I think we're ready for our breakout session.
And now let's discuss. Head to room 1 if you want to talk about what we can do to help AI be more fair. And head to room 2 if you want to talk about what else we might be able to do to help AI be more moral. And then come back together and discuss.